Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are jumping into a really powerful argument that takes on some of the biggest questions you can possibly ask. Is there a God? And if there is that God actually involved in our lives? Or did they just light the fuse on the universe and then, walk away? We're going to be breaking down a text that directly challenges two very common answers to those questions: deism and atheism.
Okay, let's kick things off with the one big question that really frames this whole debate. It's an idea that's been around for centuries. Did God create this perfect, intricate universe, like a master clockmaker, and then just step aside and let it run on its own?
So here's our game plan. First, we'll get our terms straight and look at the three main paths of belief. Then we'll dive deep into deism and why our author has some serious objections to it. After that, we'll tackle the challenge from atheism, and we'll wrap it all up with the author's final, powerful conclusion. All right, first things first. To really get what the author is arguing against, we need to map out the intellectual landscape. We have to understand the key players in this whole debate. And this table just lays it out so clearly. It really all boils down to one crucial factor. What is God's relationship with the universe? You've got theism over on one side, with a God who's active and involved. Way on the other side, you have atheism, where there's no God at all. And then smack in the middle, you've got deism, the belief in a creator who's totally, completely hands-off. So let's zoom in on deism. Now, according to the author, this idea didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Not at all. It was a reaction, a direct response to some pretty major issues that were brewing in the world of religion at that time. The author points to four key historical pressures that were all pushing in the same direction. You had this growing pushback against church dogma that just felt, irrational. At the exact same time, you have the rise of science, which made the universe look like a predictable machine that ran all by itself. Then, you throw in a deep desire for freedom from the church's tight grip on everything, and top it all off with centuries of brutal, bloody religious wars, and you can see why the idea of a distant, reasonable, universal God started to sound pretty good to a lot of people. And this is the perfect metaphor for that deist God, the ultimate clockmaker. A genius engineer who designs and builds this incredible, flawless machine, the universe, winds it up, and then just lets it run. No need for tweaks, no maintenance, and absolutely no interference. But this is where our author steps in and says, hold on a second. How does he challenge this very neat, tidy idea of a distant God? He basically argues that while deism might solve some problems, it actually creates a whole new set of them, and these new ones might be even worse. Let's get into his critique. And the author's core critique really comes down to this one powerful phrase you see right here: cosmic loneliness. The argument is that by pushing God so far out of the picture, deism leaves humanity feeling completely and utterly alone in a vast, silent, and indifferent universe. And here are the real-world consequences of that cosmic loneliness. Just think about it for a second. If God never intervenes, who are you supposed to pray to when you're in trouble? Miracles? Forget it, they're off the table. Divine guidance? Nope. Suddenly God isn't a presence in your life. He's just an abstract concept. And the author's big point is that this creates a really weak, fragile kind of faith, one that's just a tiny step away from collapsing into no faith at all. Which leads the author to pose this really provocative question. Is deism a stable belief system, a final destination, or is it really just the last exit ramp on the highway to atheism? The argument is pretty simple. Once you make God irrelevant to daily life, it's not a very big leap to making him non-existent altogether. So if deism is just a rest stop, let's look at what the author sees as the end of the line: atheism. Now, the author has to confront the total rejection of God and some of the most powerful arguments ever made against religion itself. And here we go. This is one of the heaviest critiques of religion, and the author takes it on head on: the claim that faith itself is the root cause of so much of the world's violence, division, and war. But here's the author's countermove. He completely reframes the problem. He says, look, don't blame the message, you've got to blame the messengers. He argues the real culprits are purely human failings. Things like ignorance, greed, and the cynical exploitation of people's beliefs for power and profit. This table is brilliant because it lays out the author's whole defensive strategy in one shot. You see a pattern here, right? For every single problem a critic brings up, whether it's problematic scriptures, a corrupt clergy, or violent fanatics, the author's explanation is always the same. It's a human failure, not a divine one. He argues that it's human alteration of the texts, failing human institutions, and weaponized human ignorance that are the real sources of the problem. So after walking through all these arguments and counter-arguments, where do we end up? What is the author's final big picture takeaway from all of this? And here it is. This is the core of the author's entire case. The road to disbelief, whether it leads to deism or all the way to atheism, is often not a rejection of God at all. Instead, it's an understandable, maybe even a justified reaction against the failures of the people and the institutions that claim to represent God. And so we're left with this final, really challenging question that this whole analysis builds towards. Is the real problem with belief itself, or is it with the flawed, man-made, and often corrupted forms that we see in the world? It's a question that forces us to try and separate the ideal from the real, the message from the messengers. And according to this author, making that exact distinction is the most important thing we can do to understand the true nature of both faith and doubt. Thanks for watching The Explain.